Today I want to talk about this idea that police officers don't have any empathy, that they don't care about people. I see it a lot in comments on videos. I hear it from politicians. I hear it from activists. They say that police officers just show up and they just want to start beating people down, or that they're mean to people, or, I was a victim of a crime and a police officer showed up and he didn't seem like he cared. It's very common when I see situations with police officers dealing with somebody on the side of the road that might be homeless or a drug addict or something like that. Often those police officers might be really stern with that person, might raise their voice and tell them that they need to move along, might threaten them with arrest, might even arrest them or issue them a citation. And people get really angry about this. They say, that person's homeless. How are they going to pay for that? You're an asshole. You should know better than that. And this, that, and the other thing. And the thing is that the people who are making those comments, they don't know what that officer has gone through, possibly with that individual over a span of a couple of years. They don't know about the decades of experience that that police officer has dealing with people exactly like the person that they're dealing with. I can tell you for a fact, and I was just talking to a young officer about this the other day, because he was saying that he worked for another jurisdiction, and he was asking me, how do I deal with the disagreements between him and his supervisor? This guy's only got like a year on the street, and most of that was on coaching, where he might go deal with a homeless person that's sleeping on the sidewalk or sleeping on the porch of a business, and he's trying to get them help. And he's just trying to get them to move along. And then he might have to respond on that same person like 5 weeks in a row. And after going all those times in a row and trying to help this person out, and he's doing his best to try to get this person help, his supervisor pulled him aside and said, listen, here's what you need to do. You just need to go out, issue him a citation. And if you go out it again and he's doing the same thing and you've already issued him a citation, you need to arrest him. And he was asking me, how do I deal with this? Because I have a moral dilemma. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I remember that feeling very well. As a matter of fact, that's the way most police officers feel when they start the job. I remember when I was on coaching, it was my fourth phase of coaching, and I had arrested some guy that was really nice the whole time. And I remember telling my coach, I was like, I still feel bad every single time I arrest somebody. And he looked at me and he said, I get it. I used to go through the same thing. But the thing you have to remember is that you're not doing this to them. They're doing it to themselves. They've made a decision or a series of bad decisions that led them to the point that they interacted with you, and you're doing your job to enforce the rules, and you're either taking them to jail, issuing them a citation, whatever it is. And it's not like these people are caught off guard. 99.9% of the time when police officers arrest somebody, it's not the first time they've interacted with that person. And that kind of helped me deal with the struggle of, the look that people give you. And it's partly when you're new. They can tell when an officer is new, so they kind of play it up. When they have a warrant for their arrest and they beg and plead and try to get out of it, they beg you to do something else rather than take them to jail. And you're a human being and they're a human being, and you feel really bad about that. But then you start to have experiences, and you experience the same thing over and over and over again. And that person who was begging you not to arrest them and promised you that they would be better, here you are arresting that same person again. So then when you encounter a very similar situation in the future, you're less likely to give that person the benefit of the doubt. You're less likely to give them any leeway because you've already been down this road. You already know how this is going to turn out. So you're just there to do your job as a police officer, and they have to answer for their decisions. And after you've been working for long enough, it kind of beats you down, and you get to the point where emotionally you don't have the energy to put into these people anymore, into these situations anymore. And that's where I want to tell you a story. I've told the story about this guy before, the guy that I saved by taking out the donuts. I'd been dealing with him for months and months and months. He was about to be evicted from his house. His utilities and water and everything had been shut off. And I'd been trying to get him to go to a psychiatric or a drug facility for months. Finally, one night he agreed that if I took him out for a donut, he would go to this facility with me. So we did that. We went and sat like adults, and we had a donut. I had a cup of coffee. He had a carton of milk. We had our meal, and I drove him down to this facility. I didn't hear from him for a little while until I actually had a dispatch run at his apartment. I was very happy to see that once he got into that facility, he was given a case manager, someone that looks after him, someone that delivers his medications to him on a daily basis. And he was living in kind of a group home that they had some rules there that he had to follow, and that was going to help him keep on the straight and narrow. Short time after that, he had done something to get himself kicked out of that group home. This is where you get into the situation where you realize as a police officer, you can do everything that you're supposed to do, but society often drops the ball. When you have somebody who has just been discharged from a psychiatric facility and has a drug addiction problem, they're living in a group home, and they break the rules of that group home, often what happens to them, nearly 100% of the time, based on my experience, is they just get kicked out on the street. You take this person that you just put all this effort into, getting them back on the straight and narrow, getting them off of their drug addiction withdrawals, get them relatively normal with the right kinds of medication. And when they start to act up, rather than putting them back into a more of an intensive psychiatric program, you just kick them out on the street and they're just going to fall right back into their own ways. That's what happened to him. I was dispatched on another run involving that same guy a short time later, where he was sleeping on a bench under an awning just trying to stay out of the rain. Unfortunately, it was a retirement community and he couldn't be there, and it was my job to tell him to leave. When he started talking, I realized who I was talking to. He never looked me in the face, so he didn't realize that I was the officer that had put so much effort into helping him in the past. And I remember him saying, "Hey, do you know Officer Ben?" I looked down and I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do." He said, "Well, can you tell him that I'm sorry?" And I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't tell him who I was. I was kind of heartbroken and shocked. I didn't know how to handle that situation. I made sure that he walked away, and then I got in my car. As I drove away, I started to feel bad, so I went and I bought a sandwich, and I was trying to find him to give him a sandwich, but I never found him again. I regretted that for a long time. And then I never saw him again. I never saw him again until about 2 weeks ago. I was driving down the road, and he was standing on the corner, and he flagged me down. He said, "Ben, how you doing, man?" He's like, "I haven't seen you for a while. I was hoping I'd run into you out here." So I pulled him to a parking lot, and I sat and I talked to him for probably 2 hours. I gave him my phone number. We had a long conversation about his sobriety. It turns out he'd been clean and sober for 20 months. He went to an inpatient facility, and he was there for a long period of time. He was actually set to be discharged, and he asked, "Hey, can I stay longer? I don't think I'm ready to go back out." When they let him out of there, he went into like another kind of group home, halfway house type of situation. And he was doing well there, but then he ended up having a disagreement with somebody. Words were exchanged, and they kicked him out of that group home. After 20 months of sobriety, he got kicked out of that house for having an argument with somebody. I was really impressed with his attitude that day. I had offered to take him out for a meal. I offered him to drive him someplace, asked if there's anything I could do for him. He insisted that he could handle it on his own, and he didn't want any help from me. That was probably 3 weeks ago. Yesterday, the last run I had dispatch of the day, I was getting ready to drive back to the sub and unload my gear. And we get a call that there's some medics, that's an emergency call for backup, that there's somebody standing in the middle of the road with a brick, making homicidal and suicidal statements and threatening to throw the brick at the ambulance. So I drive down to where they are, lights and sirens, pull up behind the ambulance. I see a guy standing on the street. It's none other than my friend Michael, who have put a tremendous amount of effort trying to get him off the street. He was standing there with his shirt off, his belly hanging out. He was at a bus stop. The window of the bus stop was broken. There was bricks on the ground. His clothing and stuff was scattered all over the place. I get out of the car and I said his name, and he said my name, and he expected us to be best friends. The conversation I had with him was not the kind of conversation you have with your best friend. Needless to say, I was raising my voice at him, and I was issuing very loud orders. I was being very stern with him, and I wasn't going to give him an inch. If people had not known about my experience, basically my experience in general, but more specifically my experience with him over the last 3 years, they would have said, that officer doesn't know what he's doing. That officer needs more training. That officer has no empathy. He doesn't know how to deal with these people. That guy doesn't need to be yelled at. He needs help. He needs to get into a facility. He needs food. It's incredibly frustrating when you spend as much time being a police officer as I have, and all the other officers across the country. We have decades and decades of experience. We've been dealing with these people. And you have somebody who doesn't have an ounce of experience, doesn't have an ounce of training. They see 10 seconds of an interaction, and all of a sudden they can make all these judgments about you, who you are, what you're about. The frustrating thing is a lot of the politicians are the same ones that are doing those things. I can assure you that no amount of training is going to change that part of me. When I come across someone for the first time, I'm going to help them or give them the benefit of the doubt. I put a lot of effort into helping people do better. But you get to a point where you realize it's no longer your job. You've done everything that you can for that person. And you feel also that what's the point of even trying? Because you're going to take them someplace, and the place that you take them, they're going to drop the ball. And then it gets to the point where you take that person to this place often enough that when you get to the door, they're going to say, we've already offered him help. We're not going to let him in. And then here you are as a police officer that you have someone you just transported in your vehicle. What are you going to do then? You just going to let him out of the car there and say, well, sorry, I tried? No. What you do then is you take him to another facility and another facility. And then when you do that enough times, and these people get banned from every facility that there is, that's when you get police officers that are going to show up on these runs with these individuals. You might hang some paper on them. You might yell at them and scream at them, tell them to move along. And society thinks that you don't know what it is that you're doing. But it's not me that doesn't know what I'm doing. It's society that doesn't know what I'm doing. I don't always have time to explain that to people. There's not much else to say. I hope that by kind of telling the story in kind of long form, people have a better understanding what it is that we go through on the street on a daily basis, and that we do know what we're doing. We do have the training and the experience, and maybe you need to put a little bit more trust in us. And if you don't, then maybe you should do it yourself. I think those are going to be my thoughts for today. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.